Hello everyone and welcome to our next video in this series where we're going to review what the cards that we are losing with the format rotation, the most relevant cards that we're going to lose. Roaring Skies is a very big set to lose. It doesn't have there's not too many decks that came out of this set. But there are some pretty impactful cards, as you can see on your screen. First off is Mega Rayquaza. Now, Mega Rayquaza is of course still a very valid and very alive archetype. In Expanded, I feel like it's enjoyed a lot more success than in Standard so far. In Standard, it seems to still have a presence and a big enough presence to justify including Sudowoodo in some decks. But not enough to be considered a big threat, and it definitely doesn't have the big results to go with the potential that Mega Rayquaza has. I mean, the Emerald Break, you can potentially 1-hit KO every single Pokemon out there, and before the new GX Pokemon that had 250 HP, you didn't even need Professor Kukui to do so. So you also get a really good trait in Delta Evolution where you can play that card to evolve your Rayquaza EX immediately on your turn. So a lot of pros for this card. The set also included things like Winona and Shaman, which combo really well with Mega Ray. However, I do feel like it didn't enjoy the success it could have potentially had in Standard. Maybe it was underplayed by the most skilled players. Maybe it was just overplayed in general in terms of numbers. But yeah, losing Mega Ray and losing the archetype definitely means that Sudowoodo will probably never again see play. But other than that, it won't impact that much in the metagame because no decks are really built around, or no decks are not played simply because they lose to Mega Ray. Now the next card, of course, is our Shaman EX. Now this card, hated by many because of the huge prices that ended up becoming the asking price for this. I believe the full art went all the way up to $50, $60, $70 perhaps, and the regular art around $30 to $50 or so. Setup is an incredible ability, however things are hitting too hard and too fast now, and Tapu Lele is just overall better and also doesn't have the measly 110 HP, which made Shaman a really easy target, or a sitting duck if you will. So yeah, it's too bad we're losing Shaman. It definitely enjoyed its fair share of success. It was never the focus of the deck, but it was included in pretty much every single winning list of a tournament before Garen's Rising and except Greninja. Now we have Altaria, which has an immediate combo with Mega Ray. It has the same trait, Delta Evolution, and also removes weakness from colorless type Pokemon. So when Mega Manectric was a thing, Altaria was actually viable. Now with Tapu Koko, you could consider playing a 1-1 Altaria in order to counter that if you're planning on using Mega Ray at Worlds or the Anaheim Open. But other than that, this card never really took off. Then we have Absol. This card has been included as a one-off tech in decks like Mega Gardevoir or even Gyarados for potential mirror counters. Moving 3 damage counters from one Pokemon to the other does help in making the best use of your damage output. However, it's not too common to be seen included in decks, and usually it was only used as a different way to counter Gyarados. You had this, you had Spinda, but definitely Absol was the less popular version of the Gyarados counters. Then we have Hydreigon EX. It also enjoyed a small spell of usage, I guess. Giratina and other Dragon type Pokemon did use Hydreigon EX in order to lower the free retreat thanks to its ability Dragon Road. Shred was also a good option to have in any deck because before we had a lot more prominent effects that prevented EX Pokemon or basic Pokemon from attacking. However, it definitely I don't think it ever appeared in a tournament winning deck list, at least in the big tournaments. Then we have Latios EX, which once again fast rate, allowing you to attack on your first turn, was something that a lot of people thought would be good. When this card was released and the meta games that followed afterwards, they were mostly heavily focused on EX Pokemon, and the fact that it requires a Psychic Energy really limited which decks you could play Latios EX in. However, fun fact, I did lose a trip to Europe, a trip to the International in London, because this card knocked me out of making top 8 at a regional, and so I wasn't able to maximize my best finish limit, and that put me at 5th place in Latin America, and so I missed out on the travel award to London. So I definitely don't like this card at all. In Expanded, there's those Turbo Dunk decks which use the CGI and Evolution Spray and things like that, but they're mostly gimmicky. Then we have Reshiram with a really good ability, allowing you to attach Fire Energy to your Dragon Pokemon. This card, paired with Salamence EX and Giratina, did take a regional this year in Brazil, used by Natalia Fernandez. However, I think that's the only spell of success this card enjoyed so far, ever since its release. Like, on paper it's good, but you need the Reshiram and then the Retreat Gust. You can maybe use Hydreigon, but then you need heavy attackers, and Giratina maxes out at 100 damage, and then Salamence EX depends on what your opponent plays. So I feel like there was never a really good Dragon type Pokemon that could take advantage of Reshiram. The last one that comes to mind is the Mega Rayquaza, but the Dragon type Mega Rayquaza, and that was definitely too gimmicky to be used seriously. Then we have Zekrom, which is kind of like a baby Yveltal with any kind of energy. The lightning energy cost does mean that you'll probably be playing it in a lightning type deck. However, I don't think this card ever saw play either. Energy Stream sounds good in theory, but there weren't ever any lightning type decks that could take advantage of the Zekrom. Then we have Mega Gallade, another card that on paper looked decently good, and then we had Dimension Valley, which made its attack that much better. However, despite pairing with Crobat and despite pairing with other cards to deal damage to the bench and maximize the damage from Wavering Blade, the Psychic weakness proved too much as a deterrent, and this card just never saw actual competitive play or actual competitive success. Then we have Banette, which is actually currently being talked about with the CDI. You get to evolve on your first turn, you get to use Evolution Jammer, which deals only 20 damage, but your opponent cannot evolve during his or her next turn. And since we are now seeing a resurgence in evolution decks, Banette is actually decently viable. However, because Tapu Lele exists and because Tapu Lele will be run in every single evolution deck, there's definitely that as a big drawback. So once again, stays in the gimmicky closet. Then we have Articuno, which was part of the 2015 World's Winners deck. Articuno with Delta Plus, allowing you to take an extra prize card once you knock out a Pokemon with damage from their attacks. It's actually really good. Tri-Edge, depending on flips or relying on flips is never good, but at least it has some base damage. And you would always try to never rely on hitting 3 heads or even 2 heads with Tri-Edge. You would actually try to rely on hitting just 1, because that's the expected amount that you'll get off of 3 flips. And so, well, the expected amount is 1.5, but you cannot get 1.5 heads, so you would either average between 1 and 2. And Tri-Edge, or this Articuno rather, still sees play in the Aqua Box decks. It did make top 8 at Seattle Regionals, played by Israel Sosa. And yeah, maybe this card will have its final appearance at Worlds in the Water Box decks we might see. Then we have Mega Turbo, which is obviously a very sad loss for all the Mega decks. Mega Turbo providing energy acceleration was really great and allowed Mega Ray to actually enjoy a fair share of success. And pretty much any Mega deck that you plan on using would immediately include anywhere between 1 and 4 Mega Turbos. Decks like Primal Groudon or Primal Kyogre, well actually Primal Kyogre I don't think played Mega Turbo. Primal Groudon played between 1 and 2. But every other deck, such as Mega Ray, such as Mega Mewtwo, played between 3 and 4 for sure. And we did see Mega Turbo included in the Mega Odino deck that ended up winning Worlds last year. Then we have Versus Seeker. Overall, between this and Shaman, they're both arguably the most impactful deck, the most impactful cards that we lose. Not being able to use supporter cards in the discard pile means that once you see 4N in the discard pile, once you see 4 Lysander in the discard pile, you can safely assume that your opponent will not have any more ways to do that. I guess Lysander is leaving, so Guzma meant. But yeah, this is a really good card. I'm definitely not going to miss this card too much, simply because I'm sure all of you guys are aware of my infamous Sycamore +2 Verse Seeker cards or hands that happened all throughout the season in the videos. But it's a very big loss to the metagame, and it'll definitely affect how people start building up decks towards the new format. Then we have Skyfield, a really cool stadium that combined once again really well with Mega Ray. It also combined well with Raichu, and saw play in decks like Volcanion, where you needed the extra bench space to set up Hoopa and Shaman, and then you could easily remove those once it got countered. So a stadium that definitely enjoyed a fair share of success and usage in decks outside of the intended obvious one, which was Mega Ray. Then we have Steven, which actually was part of the Lapras GX winning deck that won a regionals this season, searching for a support card and a basic energy card. It was never considered great, but it's a reliable card, if you will. It sets up your next turn, this turn by finding the energy, and your next turn by finding another supporter really well. But before Tapu Lele existed, I figured that how many copies do you run of this card? If you only run one, it seems very unreliable, and if you run more than one, you are not running other supporters, which might actually be a little bit more useful. So that's one of the drawbacks of the Steven. But now I really doubt we'll see Steven at Worlds, but hey, we might be surprised. Then we have Wally. Wally's another big loss. The turn 1 evolution was actually considered for Greninja. We might even see Greninja run Wally and a Lele engine at Worlds. It's definitely a possibility. But definitely this card was underused for its potential, I would say. It's just the fact that when this card was available to be used, basic Pokemon were dominating the format, so you never really had a chance to use it effectively. Next up we have Winona, another card that immediately combos with Mega Ray. And it was mostly used in that deck at the beginning, but then people figured out that other engines and other supporters were just that much more efficient, and so Winona never really saw any competitive play. And finally we have the double Dragon Energy, which is definitely a big loss. I'm guessing they will reprint this at some point, because they are still printing dragons with the different energy costs. So either they never intend to make Dragon Pokemon viable again, or they're going to reprint this eventually, or some sort of other Dragon type Pokemon energy mechanic. But this card included in all the Giratina decks that did really well. Definitely a big loss to the format. And yeah, less cards than in Primal Clash, I would say, with decent to good potential. However, losing this set will redefine how we build our decks, simply because of the loss of Shaman and Via Seeker. Shaman wasn't playing too big a part right now in the format, but losing Via Seeker will be really big. And yeah, that will conclude today's video, guys. Tomorrow we will be reviewing the last set, Ancient Origins, which is actually, I think, the biggest loss of all. Taking outside Via Seeker, the whole Ancient Origins set is just so good, and it's definitely going to be missed. And yeah, that will be all for me today, guys. I will see you tomorrow as we review Ancient Origins, and as we are heading towards our Burning Shadows videos and the set release on August 3rd and 4th. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.